Hey everyone, it's Savannah from Savvy in Space, and today we're going to be talking about comets. I'm really excited because some of you may know there is a comet that is currently visible right now that only comes around every 6,800 years. Yeah, I know, pretty big deal. For today's makeup look, I wanted to do something that was pretty simple but colorful, something that you guys can recreate at home no matter what kind of palette or what kind of singles you have. A lot of people have this stuff lying around. I wanted to do something with oranges and purples. I love that combination together, and yeah, so we're going to do something with that. So I'm going to be starting with my e.l.f. Luminous Putty Primer. Now, about comets. The most famous comet that everybody knows, of course, is Halley's Comet, which comes around with an orbital period of, 76 years? So, believe it or not, that's actually a really close comet. The comet that we're looking at is called NEOWISE, it has another technical name, like 3C 2020 something. I'll put it up on the screen. But NEOWISE actually is the telescope or observatory that this comet is named after because it was discovered with it. And now NEOWISE is a NASA telescope or NASA instrument that stands for Near Earth Orbit Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer. So let me break that down for you. Let's go in with tinted moisturizer and L'Oreal Infallible. All right, so NEOWISE, Near Earth Orbit Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer. What does that all mean? So near Earth, that's pretty self-explanatory. It studies objects within the solar system, right? So this observatory or this instrument also studies things like asteroids and meteorites and that sort of thing. Wide field is a term that refers to how much of the electromagnetic spectrum the instrument covers at once. So, for example, a very famous telescope called the Hubble Space Telescope, what it can do is it can have like wide, narrow, and medium filters. What that means is if we look at a narrow slice of the electromagnetic spectrum, we're typically looking at exactly this color, for example. So I want exactly the wavelength of light that corresponds to this very particular shade of red, or what it's commonly used for is something called emission lines, which I'll get to in another episode. And then wide field covers a large range of values. So it's not targeting emission lines. What we call it is it targets something called continuum, or in this case, thermal emission. Now, the next part of that acronym is IR, or infrared. Infrared are the wavelengths that are slightly less energetic than optical wavelengths and slightly more energetic than radio wavelengths. Now that last part, Survey Explorer, well, survey refers to an instrument or an observatory that takes systematic views or scans of the sky. So a survey means they're scanning the sky and they're looking for all of the objects that are detectable at this wavelength with this instrument. So it creates like sort of a catalog. So that's why it's called survey. And then Explorer is, well, I'm assuming they tacked that on just to make the acronym work a little bit better. All right, I'm gonna go in with my Wet n Wild Color Icon Bronzer in Sunset Striptease. And I'm just using sort of this denser, flat-topped blending brush, face brush from Morphe. So, comets. We have known about comets since very ancient times, and in fact there are systematic recordings of the same comets that were passing through the Earth's atmosphere that were recorded by people who lived in the golden age of the Islamic civilizations, as well as the same comets being recorded in Chinese history. So it's really interesting. It's we actually have, if you could call it that, we could call it data that goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years, and I find that very interesting. At first, the first scientific name or scientific classifications that comets had they were called hairy stars, and that's actually where the word comet comes from, is Latin for hair. I believe it's como or coma, yeah. And that is Latin for hair, because when you see the star, right, or the shooting star or the comet, right, you've got the nucleus, and then you've got this long tail that's sort of fuzzy, so I guess they thought it looked like hair, so it became known as a hairy star. Nowadays, we call comets dirty snowballs, and I'll get to that in a second. Blush time. I'm going in with a e.l.f. Primer Infused Shimmer Blush in the shade Always Cheery. I love this one. It's, for those of you, if you try to recreate this look at home, it's sort of a nice peachy pink. I'll try to insert a swatch of it. Now, for what comets are made of, the anatomy of a comet goes something like this. You've got the very centerpiece, which is called the nucleus, and this is very, very similar, almost indistinguishable in its classification from asteroids or meteorites. It is a chunk of rock, essentially. And by rock, I really do mean rock. I mean, it's made out of carbons and silicates. And then that's the nucleus, and that can be, it's usually on the order of, well, it could be as small as a few meters, or it can be as large as tens of kilometers, so up to the size of a city. And then that inner core, that's the nucleus, is covered in an outer layer of ices. And by ice, I mean ice. I mean water ice, which is very important to study when we find water ice outside of Earth, because obviously that could show signs towards extraterrestrial life, which would be great to find. And it's got water ices, but then it also has frozen gases, which is really weird. So it's got carbon monoxide ice, ammonia ice, methane ice, and those are, it's so cold that those gases we normally have on Earth are actually frozen into solid ice, and that's what covers the inner layer. And don't worry, I'll put up a diagram. I take just a little bit on my brush, and I tap it off usually, and then wherever I want the most pigment down is where I place the brush first, and then I go and blend it from there. So I like to concentrate my blush about here. So I pop it down and then blend. I blend up and back because it lifts the shape of the face and allows you to look more awake and a little bit younger. The old trick of applying blush like this, actually, watch what happens. When I stop making that little face to find the apples of my cheeks, that spot drops down too low and your face looks, it can look older and it can look not the proper shape. Anyway, the coma, so we've got the nucleus, and then we've got the outer shell, which is ices. Then, when a comet travels close enough to a star, for in our case the sun, the ice begins to sublimate. Now, for those of you who don't know, sublimating is a phase transition. So that means it's kind of like when we go from gas down to water. When something condenses, that's a phase transition. But in this case, it's an extreme phase transition because they don't go from solid to liquid to gas. They go straight from solid to gas. So if you've ever seen carbon, oh God, what do they call it? You know, dry ice. If you've ever seen dry ice, that is frozen CO2. And it creates this fog right away because it doesn't melt first, right? Dry ice doesn't melt. You never see pools or anything around it. You don't feel it's wet. It's just these dry chunks that emit this dry ice. So that's exactly what's going on in the sort of tail of the comet, in the outer part. We also have, in addition to that, they have two tails. So they have a dust tail, which is left behind by the nucleus, and then they have a gas tail. So if you ever really look closely at comets, you can actually see it's not just like one ball and then one long streak. It's like a ball and it's got two different streaks. One is a gas tail and one is a dust tail. Now let's talk a little bit more about the comet that's actually coming our way right now, or that's visible in the sky right now. If you're wondering, it'll be visible through this month. This is in July, and the best time to look for it is in early evening or early morning, so when it's first getting dark or when it's first getting light, about 5 a.m. And it's going to be relatively low in the sky. If you're in the northern hemisphere, so I'm in the American South, and for us, it's going to be about 10 degrees off the horizon. So one good way to measure that is if you're looking at the skyline and you put one hand, like when you're looking and you squint and you put one hand lining the bottom of it up with the horizon, at the top of your hand where that is, that's about 10 degrees. So you should be able to spot the comet right about there. Some facts about this comet. Its nucleus comes from material that was at the formation of our solar system. So its nucleus and the material contained within inside is about 4.6 billion years old. So we'll get into another episode about planetary formation and everything like that, but essentially at the very beginning, our solar system was nothing but a bunch of crazy rocks and pebbles, and everything started to sort of clump together, right? Some of it clumped together to form big planets, but then there was some like gravel left over, right? So a lot of these smaller chunks, some of them wound up becoming asteroids, and then some of them wound up becoming comets because they got coated in different layers of gaseous ices. Gaseous ices. I mean ices formed by substances we normally think of as gases, not gaseous ices. And it originates from somewhere called the Oort cloud, and that's the outermost definition of our solar system. All right, now I'm finally going to start on my eyeshadow. I'm going to take, I like to take a smaller blending brush these days for my crease, something not too large so I can control the placement a little bit better. And I'm going to go in with this matte orange eyeshadow. It's pretty light. It's called Mango Margarita, and this is also from Gimme Glows Cosmetics. I will start using palettes on this channel soon, but I've got a lot of singles, and I figured I wanted to do more looks, not like reviews of palettes, so I wanted people to be able to recreate these looks at home with any of the same colored shadows they had. I'm going to try to scoop you guys in closer. So I always start on the inner portion of my crease and blend outwards. Now, there are two major groups or types of comets in the way that we classify them. There are comets that come from the Kuiper belt, which is a whole lot closer, and that's where like Halley's Comet lies. And then there are comets that lie in the Oort cloud, which come by with much less, I don't want to say much less regularity because they still come regularly, but much less often. So we've got short period and long period comets. Period is just another way of saying the time it takes to rotate around the sun. So when we say orbital period, like the orbital period of Earth is 1 year. You can kind of see I go slightly past my eyebrow, and I kind of just stop blending when I get up to my brow bone. Now I have really hooded eyes and not a lot of eye space, so my placement might not be the best for everybody, but just how I do it, just showing you. And I'm going to bring it down onto the lid a little bit. This is kind of unnecessary, but I want my shimmer to really have that orange base sticking out underneath it, but the important part is that it's in the eye crease. And I'm just, as you can see, blending with windshield wiper motions. Alright, now for the lid shade, I am going to take this beautiful orangey, corally, pinky shimmer from Gimme Glow Cosmetics. This is called Fireworks. I'm going to put it all over the lid, super simple, nothing special. See how gorgeous that is? These shimmers are everything. And only $7 each per shadow. So if you're starting out a makeup collection and you just want a few special shades, make an order from Gimme Glow. They're fantastic. One other thing to note about the orbit of NEOWISE is that it is highly eccentric. Now this is a really important concept when we talk about solar system items and items that orbit, well, around anything. Just so you know, in our solar system, it might look, or you might assume, that the planets orbit in a perfect circle, but that's not true. Kepler, who was a famous scientist back hundreds of years ago, he proved that in part of his, he has like 3 planetary laws. He proved that all of the planetary orbits are actually called elliptical. Now, if a orbit or a shape, if an ellipse, looks more like a circle and is only like a little bit ovular, like stretched out, then it's got a low eccentricity. But if it's really stretched out, it's like a really narrow, thin orbit or ellipse, then we say that has a very high eccentricity. Now the solar system planets from Mercury out to Neptune, those orbits have very, very low eccentricities, which means they are very nearly circular, but not circular. All right, time to go into the lower lash line. That's all I'm doing on the top. I just want to keep it simple and cute and colorful for summer. I am taking one of my current favorite shadows. I swear I want to use this every single day. It's called Allium. It's I would say it's a neutral purple. It doesn't really lean warm or cool, maybe a little bit cooler in the undertones, and it's a matte from Menagerie Cosmetics. So when comets have an orbit that is like maximum eccentric, the maximum eccentricity would be something called a parabolic, orbit. And this is where it essentially comes into the solar system, slingshots around the sun, and passes out, and we never see it again. That would be parabolic, and NEOWISE is nearly parabolic. I just pack on and brush a little. I love the way that orange and purple look together. I think simple complementary colors can be so cute and, dare I say, almost wearable. And I'm just sort of meeting up the edge here, where the orange meets the purple, but I'm not blending them into each other. If I do, they're going to turn a muddy gray-brown that I'm not really a fan of. So I'm just kind of trying to blend them together as little as possible, but getting them to touch, so I don't have any gaps out here. So I do extend this sort of past my lower lash line. See that my lower lash line technically stops here, but I'm pulling the purple out to here. All right. And the reason why an object would get thrown into a parabolic orbit or a parabolic passing is, well, believe it or not, due to Jupiter. Not just Jupiter, but Jupiter is the main player in our solar system. What normally happens is an object is passing by and its path gets perturbed or bothered or disrupted by the gravitational field of very massive planets. And of course, in our solar system, Jupiter is the largest planet and it causes a lot of perturbations of passing objects. Believe it or not, we can, I'm taking this very pretty light pink foiled shadow called Wednesday. You see how reflective that is? And I'm putting this on the inner corner. I'm going to wrap it around a little bit on the top and pull it down a little on the bottom. So yeah, it's actually Jupiter's fault that a lot of items get off course, because its gravity is so strong that it is able to perturb the motion of different objects. It's actually really cool because if it weren't for Jupiter's gravity is so strong that it actually pulls in a lot of meteors and asteroids and stuff that normally would be on path to hit Earth. So I like to think of Jupiter as sort of like the big, tough older brother of the solar system who protects us and guards the inner solar system planets from getting hit by too many rocks. In fact, if we didn't have Jupiter, it would be a lot more hostile, and that's one thing we have to consider when we talk about habitability of exoplanets, is how likely are they to be hit by a meteor? Do they have a big brother that would help protect them and help life form on the inner planets, All right, I'm going to go off camera and finish the other eye, and then we'll finish off the face. All right, here I've got my second eye on and liner and mascara. I did a simple winged eyeliner, and I did it off camera because I just want to save time, and to be honest, I don't know how to film that yet. Right, I'm going to go in with my Becca Vanilla my Becca Vanilla Quartz highlighter and just pop this on my cheekbones with a Wet n Wild brush. So the last thing I really wanted to talk about and mention is, why do we study comets? I mean, for one, we should probably just like know about the items, objects, celestial objects that are nearby in our solar system, just to make sure, you know, we don't get hit. Just maybe we should know about the things that might hit us. They're also pretty, right? So we like to look at them. They're naked eye objects, which automatically makes them interesting. You know, we don't need any telescopes to see them necessarily. But the biggest reason is actually part of the reason why why the name NEOWISE includes the term infrared. It's because we like to look at, remember how I was talking about how we have those ices and then they start to sublimate and turn to gas? Well, it forms sort of a pseudo-atmosphere around that nucleus called the coma. And we really are interested in studying the emission lines from the certain molecules and chemicals found in the ices and found in the center of the rocks, because this comet was formed at the beginning of our solar system. So we can learn more about the environment right at the beginning of the solar system and learn more about how did Earth get all the different chemicals and rocks and things that it did? Why does Earth have so much carbonaceous material? Why does Earth have so many silicates in its crust? And by looking at objects that formed at the same time as Earth did, we're able to learn a little bit more about our planet, as well as how future planets might form as pertains to the field of exoplanets. For lipstick, I'm going to use my Smashbox Be Legendary lipstick. This is in the satin formula, or like the original formula they have. They also have a matte formula, and this is in the shade Juice It. Again, if you don't have this lipstick, use anything like a peachy pinky or coral. I know, for example, at the drugstore, Maybelline has some really, really beautiful coral colors in their line. The last thing I really did want to mention, though, was something called spectroscopy, which is going to be the subject of a whole other video. But for those of you who are watching who have some understanding of astrophysics, we use spectroscopy and the study of the different molecules and emission lines coming off of the atmosphere of the comet. We use those to study the organic molecules that are located within. And this can be done with, this is particularly done in the IR range because a lot of the emission lines just happen to lie there. Oh, such a pretty color. See how easy that glided on too? If you're a fan of lipstick, or you're willing to spend like $20 on a beautiful lipstick to wear every day or something, I got this on sale. I totally recommend these Smashbox Be Legendary lipsticks. I've been obsessed with them. They're one of my favorite formulas. Hit it with, oh, that's such a pretty color. I love this color. It's called Juice It. How fun is that? Like orange juice. I love orange juice. I'm going to use my all-nighter setting spray. And that completes the look. All right. I hope you guys learned something about comets. I know I got to freshen up on my material as I was preparing to film this, which was exciting for me. And let me know what kind of content you guys are interested in seeing in the future. I've got several ideas lined up for videos, but what I really want to know from you guys is, would you like to keep seeing these blended videos where I talk about astronomy and makeup at the same time? Would you like to see some specific dedicated makeup videos? And would you like to see some specific dedicated astronomy videos? Also, for those of you who I hope become a regular audience, am I providing enough information, or am I going a little above your head? I want to make sure that I explain everything thoroughly, but still include enough interesting information. Thank you so much, guys, for sticking around. I really, really appreciate your support as I try to grow on this channel and help educate about astronomy. Thank you. See you later.